stunning new reporting on an elaborate ruse to conceal the secret plane that President Trump used to fly out of Turkey last month. The Washington Post reports this tonight, saying, quote, an Iranian assassination threat against President Trump prompted an extraordinary operation in which he flew secretly from Turkey on an alternate military aircraft while the White House said he was aboard Air Force One. If you look back at the video from that day now, you can see how this clandestine mission played out. President Trump was seen boarding Air Force One at 8:24 p.m. local time on July 8th. But actually, according to the Post, and you can see here, Trump and several of his aides were secretly shuttled minutes later onto this airport catering truck, which was elevated and positioned at a door out of the view of the cameras. Now, the Post reports that the president was on that catering truck when it pulled away from Air Force One at 8:30 p.m., secretly bringing him to a smaller plane, an Air Force C-32A, making the Air Force One that everyone thought he was on a decoy that still had the reporters who thought the president had boarded that plane and who you see boarding right here on the right, and some White House staff aboard. The Washington Post reports, and I quote, the maneuver meant that the president's actual location was concealed from the American public and many senior U.S. officials for hours. Air Force One then landed in the UK hours later. Now, it's still not clear, as the Post notes tonight, how the president was transported from that other secret plane back onto Air Force One after it landed. You see here the reporters captured the president getting off the plane that they thought he had just flown on with them to the UK, and he's seen coming down the stairs just before 11 p.m. After greeting American service members on the tarmac, Trump got on the new Air Force One jet. That's the one that was given to the president by the Qatari government, and then he flew back to Washington. Now, the plane that he's getting on here is not to be confused with the old Air Force One decoy or the military plane that he flew on secretly. But it was when the president got back on this plane to fly home to the U.S. that he was asked by reporters why they had been told to lower their window shades on that first flight, which is extremely unusual and not typically something that happens for the press, that sits on the right side of the plane, which is where that airport catering truck was, now that you look back at that other video. But given what we know now, given the pictures that you can see now, it makes what the president told reporters in that gaggle afterward all the more noteworthy.
You're saying there wasn't a security concern?
No. Why would it?
Do you know why they had us close our window blinds? That was not usually.
Well, yeah, because you're, probably on a dangerous flight because of the sleaze bags that we have to deal with.
So you think that Iran was possibly thinking of trying
Well,
to...
I mean, if they asked you to close your windows, probably they feel that way. They didn't ask me to close mine, but if they did, I would have done it.
Were you aware of any credible threat by Iran against Air
Well,
Force
I have
One?
a threat all the time. I'm number one on their list before you. But if I go, you go, right?
But was there a
So
specific threat today?
perhaps someday you want to change professions.
If I go, you go. Though the president wasn't actually on the same plane as the reporters who were asking him that question. And when they asked him about why they had to lower their own shades, the president said, well, he wasn't told to lower his. Well, he was on a secret plane. He was not on the same plane that those reporters and some White House staffers were flying on. Joining me tonight is one of the reporters who broke this story, Washington Post national security reporter Dan Lamothe. And Dan, I mean, this is a remarkable scoop and very thorough reporting here. Can you just kind of walk us through what you've learned here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most significant piece here is that for weeks now, the American public talking about the two Air Force One jets, the newer one from Qatar and the older one from the last couple decades of operations. And in reality, the president was on neither plane. This came to the Post in part because individuals thought that there was a hole in public understanding here that needed to be clarified.
I mean, it also, just in terms of how they came up with this, I mean, you know, a big question is going to be how unprecedented this is. The idea that they would take the president, not only put him on an alternate aircraft, but use a catering truck at the airport to do so.
Yeah, you can see some creativity and ingenuity in how they were able to pull this off. And I don't think there's any dispute here. I mean, Iran is a serious threat to the United States. Iran is a threat to senior U.S. officials that predates this administration. There is cause for concern. It's unclear at the moment what exactly triggered them to take these extreme measures. But either way, we've gone about a month now since it occurred, and until today, there was no public understanding of it.
Well, and you report that the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth also boarded that C-32A plane separately using external stairs, which means people could see him boarding it. And you write that this is part of an attempt to make the flight appear typical. That's a plane that typically other VIPs, cabinet members would fly on. Do we know who else, if anyone, was on that secret plane with the president?
I can't speak at the moment with any specificity to who else was aboard that plane. But yes, Secretary Hegseth, I'm told, went up the external stairs, deliberately so, as a part of a larger plan to make it look like he was the senior official on that plane. The C-32s that they used that day are commonly used. The vice president uses them. The president uses on occasion domestically. I have flown on C-32s in the past with general officers. It's not uncommon to see VIPs on that plane. But obviously, when you have even the usage of an Air Force One call sign on a plane that the president is not aboard in that moment, that's remarkable.
Well, and that's actually a really good point, because typically the understanding is that any plane, any aircraft the president is on is Air Force One, or any helicopter that he's on, that's technically Marine One. But you said that the one that he was actually flying on had a nondescript call sign, while the other plane that everyone thinks he's on is still considered and still the call sign of Air Force One.
Yes, that's right. And then as we kind of backtrack some of the publicly available flight tracker data on this, you have the newer jet from Qatar that landed with a relatively nondescript call sign a couple hours in advance in Britain. The C-32 simply did not show up in flight tracker data at all, at least in the publicly available information we had. And the Air Force One jet landed with the Air Force One call sign, despite the president not being aboard. There's a serious shell game of sorts that occurred there, to keep the president safe.
And were there White House staffers who were on the decoy Air Force One that also thought that the president was still on that plane?
My understanding is there was some White House staff that did not know. This was kept close hold in a small group. And obviously the White House press corps, which reported not only in that day, but in the subsequent weeks as well, that the president had traveled on the quote unquote old Air Force One. That's simply not the case, we're told.
My colleague Barbara Starr, who is a veteran Pentagon correspondent, obviously you know her well, she made a good point about the threat level and what this speaks to, of how concerned that U.S. officials were about this. And she says this suggests that the U.S. believed the threat to the president was not just imminent, perhaps, but there was concerns about growing Iranian precision and targeting and advanced accuracy at range and altitude. She says if the intel was that credible, then was everything in place to carry out an attack? And if so, what has happened since to disrupt that capability? I mean, she's asking the question about just how serious this threat to the president really was.
Yeah, I don't have great clarity on what the specifics are that triggered them to take these measures, but I would note that as technology advances, as we have seen Iran and a number of other countries take on, aerial drones and a variety of other kind of munitions, the United States as a nation is just facing simply more kinds of threats, more exquisite threats that it did not have to worry about a handful of years ago.